Hi, welcome back. It is Crown of Midnight recap time. I'm so excited to film these. These are some of my favorite videos to make, even though they are a lot of work. And this book, Crown of Midnight, is the second book in the Throne of Glass series. SarahJMaas has officially come out and said that her preferred reading order, the recommended reading order for Throne of Glass, is to read Assassin's Blade after this one. So this is the second book in the series. And I loved this book on a reread. This is actually doing the reread that I did for the notes for the series when I first reread through. And I did not realize how many like little hints and Easter eggs for the rest of the series are in this book. And it was so much fun to reread it. Last one, if you watched my Throne of Glass recap, there were like 120 slides that I went through over the course of that video with my little like my beautiful artistic renderings of what is happening in this book. And this one has over 200. Like I got a little too into it. I had a little too much fun. But that being said, let's jump right into Crown of Midnight by SarahJMaas. We will be going through everything that happened in Crown of Midnight. So like obviously there's going to be full spoilers both for this book and for Throne of Glass, the first book, but there won't be series spoilers. So if you're watching this video as like a refresher before you move on to Heir of Fire, you're safe, you're cool, no worries. I'm not going to spoil anything for you. I will talk about a few things that happened in Assassin's Blade, but only to the extent that they're discussed in this book already. So no worries about spoilers. Before we get into things, let me just remind you who our main crew is. We'll introduce more characters to like the scheme as we come in, but these are our main guys that you need to like kind of be familiar with. And by kind I mean like they're the main characters. So you need to be familiar with them from the jump. First up, we have Queen of Queens, Love of My Life, Celaena Sardothien, Ardalain's Assassin, the King's Champion, and Alentia. She is an 18-year-old who is formerly known as Ardalain's Assassin because she was the most famous, like most notorious, best assassin in all of Ardalain, which is the country where they live. We ended the last book with her winning this contest that made her the King's Champion. But essentially her job is to be the King's like official murderer for hire. And so she's going out and murdering people that are trying to threaten like the crown at large. Next up on our little chart is Mr. Dorian Havillard, the Crown Prince of Ardalain. He's 19, he is the heir to the throne, he's the eldest son, and last book we left him and he is like heartbroken. He fell in love with Celaena in the last book. Celaena was his like pick for this King's Champion competition, and they had like a little flirty friendship that turned into like a romance with some like light kissing, and essentially got dumped by her at the end of the last book. So he's a little bit heartbroken, and SJM loves to try to convince us that Dorian is like a player, that he is going around sleeping with everyone in this castle, that he is just like, that's what he's after. He's a womanizer. It's false. I don't know why SJM decided this was the narrative she was going to go with and then also give him all these other hobbies. We're going to talk about him. He's just like the sweetest sweetheart. Does he always think things through? No. But he always means well. And his best friend since childhood is Chaol, who is captain of the Royal Guard. He is 22 and he is best friends with Dorian. He moved to the palace when he was 12 to undergo training there and then wound up staying there for the duration of his teenage years into his young adult years because he became such close friends with Dorian. The next book should have captain of the guard. We kind of get a little bit more clarity. Last book I was like, what the heck does he do? But I think in this book we get a little bit more clarity. Essentially he's like head of security for the castle itself. Like the Royal Guard, he's like the head of the Secret Service for the royal guys. But apparently this requires very little violence, and until the very end of last book, Chaol had never killed anyone. Also he has to do a lot of detective work, which does seem like it would be outside of his scope of his job, but it's not. He's also the head detective for the crown. He's from a ruling family, Ananel, which is the city that's like up in the mountains of Ardalain, but relinquished his crown in order to become captain of the guard, and has been hanging out for the last 10 years here at the castle. The Enneagram 6th that I've ever seen. And I think some of these character traits can lead people to hate him. And Chaol he'll make some mistakes in this book. Like he will mess the heck up. But I think we should forgive him and move forward because I think he's a nice guy and I think he means well, even when he messes up. And then one last character who I think is super important to be kind of cognizant of as we enter this book is Nehemia. And Nehemia is this princess of Elway, and considered like the light of Elwë. And Elwë is one of the only countries that are in Aurelia, the continent, that is not under Ardalayne's thumb entirely. They haven't been fully taken over. While Ardalayne is politically ruling over Elwë, it is not taken over the crown. Like the monarchy is still standing. But she is a suspected rebel, and based on the conversations she had with Celaena in the last books, we know that this is like definitely true. Last book, she saved Celaena using this magic called weird marks. We're going to talk lots more about weird marks in this book, and so she has a little bit more understanding of magic. Magic has been banned in Ardalayne. Nehemia kind of has some understanding of what's happening with magic, and also she does speak Elwë and the Common Tongue, which is what initially brought Celaena and her together. Part 1, the King's Champion. This time these are like SarahJMaas's parts, not mine. Last time I made up the parts of the book. The book is only broken into 2 parts, but they are SarahJMaas's parts. So we open with Celaena doing some sneaking around at Lord Nyrel's house. We don't really know much. We dropped right into this first opening scene. Now that she's King's Champion, she's mostly been killing rebels and people who are suspected of like stirring up rebellions within the city, and this guy is her latest mark. And we catch her in this first chapter sneaking up on him, going to kill him. Just as a refresher before we jump into the next scene, as a reminder of who these 2 guys are. So we have the King of Ardalayne. Like I've mentioned a couple times, Ardalayne has been taking over the continent of Aurelia and not doing it very nicely either. I don't know if there's a way for you to do it nicely, but he's been doing it quite ruthlessly. There's been a lot of brutality in his takeover, and he's also banned magic, and that has had a large impact because there was like a lot of people that used magic throughout the kingdom. And then we also have Duke Harrington. Duke Harrington, we have a little bit less of a kind of a context around him. He seems to be just like close friends with the king. We know that they're in cahoots. They like planned some of the stuff that happened last book together, and he was the one who was actually responsible for the poisoning that happened at the end of the last book with Celaena and Kaltain and Cain and all of that. Everyone whose name starts with a C. So we are at the castle, and Celaena shows up, and everyone is like chilling. There's some sort of meeting, and she shows up with a bag, and she opens the bag up, and a head rolls out, and it is like a pretty well decayed head that has seen better days. And she also throws Lord Nyrel's seal ring across the floor, the little ring he would use to like be his signature on letters. And she is acting like very haughty, very aloof, she's acting like an assassin. It's a very strong contrast from the last book where Celaena was pretending to be this jewel thief, Lady Lillian, and she was always in like the fancy dresses, and kind of a pretty substantial contrast also to the Celaena that the boys were used to seeing, who was like friendly and told stories and like laughed with them and chatted with them. She like is like this kind of hostile, kind of scary creature almost that has come in and left this head on the floor. The king is like pleased with her. She did her job, and so he gives her her next mark because this is how it's been working. He's been giving her one name off the list. She goes and kills them. She comes back. She gets the next name, etc. She is not getting the whole list at one time. And the next name on the list is Archer Finn, which is a little bit of a problem because Celaena actually knew Archer Finn when she was a child. Archer Finn is a courtesan, and the courtesans and the Assassin's Keep were very much always commingling. The bosses, Arabin and Clarissa, were like good friends, and they just intermingled a lot. And also like a lot of orphans were sent to one of the 2 places. And so Archer Finn knows her from her time in assassin school at the Assassin Keep, and they actually at some point Archer was taking like classes essentially at the Assassin's Keep because he was such a a sought after courtesan that he needed to be able to like protect himself. And Celaena did have a little bit of a crush on him, but now he's a suspected rebel, and also he's just generally hot. Celaena at one point does call him like the most beautiful man in the world. So meanwhile, Dorian is thinking about this version of Celaena that he's seen for like the first time, and he is quite put off by this. He's feeling a little betrayed, honestly, by this version of Celaena. He like cannot really fathom the fact that she would kill a man and kill his wife because she has said that she murdered Lord Nyrel's whole family, and he's like, this does not seem like the Celaena I know. And he begins to think that like maybe she tricked him into developing feelings for her so that he would help her become King's Champion. Okay, one, could you blame her? I don't know if we can really blame her in this situation, but also, okay, Dorian. Like, clearly she's a good actress. She's either lying here or had been lying to me. Like, both of these cannot be true and both cannot be her. And so Dorian's just kind of like a little bit like, like I said, he's a little bit heartbroken from the last book, and I think he's trying to really rationalize things. Meanwhile, Celaena goes up to her room, and we learn what actually happened. She has not actually been killing people. She has been letting them escape and finding people that look similar enough to them and taking their bodies from like 6 houses and hospitals and using those body parts to trick the king. But she's a little bit worried she's not going to be able to do the same thing for Archer Finn because he is so recognizable. She won't be able to just pull any random head out of a hospital and be like, it's Archer Finn. They'll be like, that guy is not cute enough to be Archer Finn. She's a little bit worried about that, but we'll figure it out. That night, she has a nightmare about Cain and everything that happened with Cain in the last book. So as a refresher, if you can't quite remember, the last task they had to become the king's champion were these little duels, and she was set out to duel Cain, who is this guy who had been summoning a Riderick, which was a demon monster, and murdering the other assassins, and had been channeling that murdered energy into his own power. So he was dealing with some sort of dark magics, and so he was doing that, and he was going to fight Celaena. Celaena still would have won because remember, she's the coolest, most amazing assassin in all of Ardline, but she was poisoned before that she competed with this, and so she was kind of delirious and loopy, and she wound up needing to have Nehemia help her summon the ghost of Queen Elena to help her fight off the monsters. It was stressful. Anyway, she has a little bit of a nightmare about it, but she wakes up and she's okay. The next morning, her and Nehemia go outside and they're playing with Fleetfoot. Fleetfoot was the puppy that Dorian got Celaena for her birthday. Or not for her birthday, for Yulemas last year. Fleetfoot is still doing great. And they are kind of playing with Fleetfoot, and Celaena is using this time to update Nehemia about what is happening with the rebels, what are her latest tasks, those sorts of things. Nehemia's okay, you're kind of helping the rebel cause, but also when are you going to do more than just sort of help? This is not action, this is just gathering information. And Celaena's I really don't think there's anything I can do. And Nehemia's at what point does gathering information become a stalemate? She's really questioning the level at which Celaena is putting off actually doing any real substantive actions towards assisting the rebellion, because Nehemia knows that Celaena is from Terrasen and that she's from this taken over nation, and she also experienced the slave mines and the brutal conditions that the king of Ardline has subjected so many of his people to, and yet she's unwilling to actually do anything. And then Celaena and Chaol are on a run. They've been training together since the first book, and they've continued to train together in this book, and they are bickering and flirting at the same time while they're on a run. And while Chaol is having a very anxious inner monologue, I think we really get to see the level of anxiety this boy has in this book, and it is pretty high. Chaol asks Celaena how often she thinks about the people that she's killed, because I think I mentioned, Chaol is quite torn up about the fact that he killed Cain. Cain was coming after Celaena, was trying to kill her after the duel had already ended. Chaol killed Cain, so Cain wouldn't kill Celaena. And he is still quite torn up about this, even though he did it to save Celaena. And so he asks Celaena how often she thinks about the people she's killed. And Celaena's they will always stay with you. This is something that you have to carry for the rest of your life. And he's just kind of thinking about his relationship with Celaena, and he says, or he thinks, he doesn't say this out loud, he'd been realizing it more and more recently, how much he hated it when she left him behind, how he hated her for setting off on those cursed missions and not contacting him for days or weeks. He didn't know when it had happened, but he had somehow started caring whether or not she came back. And after all they'd already endured together. He'd killed Cain at the duel, killed him to save her. Part of him didn't regret it. Part of him would do it again in a heartbeat. But the other part of him still woke up in the middle of the night, drenched in sweat that felt too much like Cain's blood. And if it ever came down to having to choose between his king and Celaena, he prayed to the word that he'd never be faced with that decision. Staying firmly on this side of the line was a logical choice, the honorable one too, since Dorian. He'd seen the way Dorian looked at her. He wouldn't betray his friend like that. So I want to chat about my beloved Chaol because I do think he gets more of his fair share of hate, and I think, like I mentioned, we will certainly talk about some of the things he does wrong, but I think his growth, his character arc over the course of the series is my favorite character arc. I think he really grows a lot and learns a lot, but also is just at all times, Chaol is really, I believe, trying his best. His best is just not always good enough. A little bit about why I think he's an Enneagram 6. I apologize for this detour. This whole little page is from the Enneagram Institute. If you don't know Enneagram, it is a personality typing system. I think it's really fun. I love a personality typer. This one is my personal favorite. I find it the most accurate for myself. I'm an Enneagram 5 with a 6 wing, so I'm a 6 expert. But anyway, he's a 6, which is called the loyalist, and he is loyal to the king and to the crown. And I think this is largely because of his relationship with Dorian, but also probably there's a level of institutional loyalty as well. But I think what people forget is that his first loyalty is to Dorian and to the king and to the crown. And there's a level of safety that comes with having loyalty to this country and to this place and to feel included. I think he does not want to feel isolated. He does not have a relationship really with his parents. His dad is like the worst. His mom is nice, but is kind of like, I don't know, not provided a lot of support. He hasn't really seen them since he was 12. And if without like Dorian and the larger community he's built up around the crown, like he would be all by himself, and like he's an anxious boy as it is. And type 6s also like really crave security and like are quite fearful in general. And I think his relationship and his fondness for Celaena both directly compromises this. One, because of what he just said, like Dorian was in love with Celaena last book, and so to like infringe on that, to step over that, does feel like an overstep, like, of his best friend. His friendship is one of, I would say, the top priority for Chaol. When he's like thinking about things, he's like, his loyalty to Dorian is number one, and I think his relationship with Celaena directly compromises that, and I think it should. Like, Celaena just showed up like 6 months ago, and you want him to drop his lifelong best friend for her? I don't know. That's not very girl boss of you. I do really just think he's misunderstood in the character, and I really love him, and I hope that even if you don't like him, you can grow to like tolerate him. Someone we do not have to grow to tolerate, Roland Havillard. So we're introduced to Roland, who's Dorian's cousin. He is just like around one day. I think his whole family is there, but we mostly interact with Roland. It seems like he's around Chaol's age, so in his early 20s, and honestly he just has like yucky vibes. We also learned that Chaol one time punched him. So, we don't know yet why Chaol punched him, but probably he deserved it, because Chaol's not just punching anyone. A few days later, Celaena has been out shopping. One thing we know about Celaena from the last book, and even more from Assassin's, but if you've read that one, is that Celaena loves a good shopping trip. Celaena likes stuff. Like, she's a material girl. Like, she likes a cute outfit. She likes a fancy soap. She likes a chocolate cake. Like, she likes the pleasures, the finer things in life. And now that she's a king's champion, she has, like, a pretty generous salary. And she is fed and housed in the castle, so she doesn't have to pay for that stuff. So she can just buy fun stuff. And buy fun stuff, she will. But she returns from shopping to find Dorian waiting for her in her room. He wants to be friends. He's like, I know we had like a little bit of romance last year, but I think it would be great if we could be friends. Like, I really value your friendship. And Celaena feels really torn about this, because she doesn't know if she can be friends with the son of the king. Especially the more time she spends with like Nehemia and talking about how just like brutal this kingdom is and Dorian's father. And in the last book, one of the reasons she broke up with Dorian is because she like really saw that connection between him and the royal family. Obviously, he's his father's son, and despite the fact that Dorian is like a sweetheart, he has also not done really anything to prevent all of these terrible things from happening, and he has like direct access to power, and there's a level at which she is having a hard time overlooking that. But Celaena has work to do, and so after chatting with Dorian, she heads out to tail Archer. She's just trying to follow him and gather information. This is what she's been doing, partially just to kind of buy her more time to deal with these people, is to tail them, not only to like find a way to kill them unsuspiciously, but also just to kind of gather information about the rebellion, some of which she feeds to the king and some of which she is giving to Nehemia, and just like, you know, she likes to be informed. But she doesn't learn anything really. She's just like going around town. She then goes back to the castle and she heads to Chaol's room. And Celaena has taken to spending a lot of time in Chaol's room because of the secret passage in her room gives her the heebie-jeebies. Bad memories are down there, and so she doesn't always love to spend time alone in her room. Freaks her out a little bit. So she spends time with Chaol. And tonight when she's spending time with Chaol, she decides to ask Chaol about Varian, the crime boss who killed Sam Cortland. We have a diagram to explain who all these characters involved are, just as a refresher. So you've got Arab and Hamel, who's my least favorite man on the continent of Aurelia. He's the head of the Assassin's Guild. He was Celaena's guardian from the time that she was 8 years old. He raised her to be an assassin, and he is the literal scum of the earth. I do not like that man. Then we have Wesley, and Wesley was Arabin's personal guard. Celaena and him had like a kind of tense relationship. Celaena didn't ever get along with him, but the night that Celaena was captured, he warned her not to go. He clearly knew something was happening, and he was trying to warn her not to go so she didn't get captured. So ever since then, she's been like, I don't know, less upset about him. Then we have Farron Rourke, and he is a professional bad guy. He is head of a crime he's like a crime boss, and she and Sam were supposed to kill him, but instead Farron ended up brutally torturing and killing Sam. And then Sam Cortland, if you don't remember, is Celaena's childhood rival. They were about the same age. They grew up in the Assassin's Keep together, but by the end of Assassin's Blade, they have a relationship, and his death was like really hard on her. So after Farron killed Sam. Got it? And then Celaena tried to kill Farron, didn't work. She got sent to prison instead. While she was in prison, Wesley killed Farron. Like a few days after she got sent to prison, Wesley killed Farron as revenge. Chaol actually is like, we've been trying to figure out why he did it. Like it seemed very weird and out of like, it didn't make sense with what we knew. But Celaena knows it was revenge for killing Sam. And then Arobynn killed Wesley for like kind of overstepping this line, because the relationship between the crime bosses and the Assassins Guild is that they have kind of a sort of tenuous alliance, and so in order to maintain that, Arobynn killed Wesley, and he killed him by impaling him on a fence outside of Farron O'Rourke's house, and just letting him bleed to death, and the servants were instructed not to take him down. So like an incredibly brutal death. And Celaena fills in a little bit of the blanks for Chaol, and she talks about Sam and kind of tells him her side of the story and how Sam had been killed, and she had actually been going to try to avenge Sam's death when she had been taken to Endover. And Chaol asks her if Sam loved her, and Celaena says, very much, and it's very sweet. I love Sam. And then for some reason, I do not know why Chaol thought this was the appropriate, like, I'm gonna make a connection on this. Chaol's like, I know you're sad, because your boyfriend was brutally tortured and murdered in front of you, and then you got sent to slave mines. One time my girlfriend cheated on me. Like, I think Celaena is asking about details about Roland and, like, what's the deal with Roland, and so he, like, it kind of makes a little bit more sense than I'm explaining it, but it is still a little weird. Anyway, so the reason that Chaol wound up punching Roland that one time is because Roland stole Chaol's girlfriend. Like, Chaol's girlfriend was in Roland's bed. They slept together. And so Chaol obviously punched him, as you would. And Celaena, as she's leaving, says, if she picked Roland, she meaning Chaol's girlfriend, if she picked Roland over you, that makes her the greatest fool that ever lived. And we love that. It will come back, so remember that. Put that in your little brain vault. And Celaena can't sleep. She leaves Chaol's room, but she can't sleep, so she decides to go to the library. She's hanging out at the library. Girlie loves a book, so she's hanging out at the library, and the eye of Elena starts glowing and getting warm, and like the vibes get kind of weird, and then she just hears something whisper plans. And so she leaves. She says, "Oh, time for me to go." And she decides to go through her secret door in her room, and she's going down through the tunnels to go talk to Queen Elena. Go to the tomb and talk to Queen Elena. And she gets there, and the door knocker is alive. It's clearly described as like a skull door knocker. I have always pictured it as a doorknob from Alice in Wonderland, and I won't stop now. So here she is. The doorknob is alive, and Celaena is like, magic is gone, so how are you still here? And the doorknob is like, I'm an ancient magic that was put in place before magic was outlawed, and so like, I'm still here. And Celaena's like, okay, cool, whatever. I need to go talk to Queen Elena. And the doorknob is like, she is exhausted after all the work she put in saving you last book, so unfortunately you can't talk to her because she's resting. And Celaena's like, okay. And Celaena then asks him, what's your name? And he goes, what's your name? It's Celaena Sardothien. She ground out. The skull barked out a laugh. Oh, that is too funny. The funniest thing I've heard in centuries. Be quiet. My name is Mort, if you must know. So we have Mort the doorknob, and he is a fun character that we get in this book. Why didn't she see Mort the doorknob in the last book? I don't know if that's ever answered. And then, before she leaves, before she heads out, Mort leaves her with a little prophecy, because what else is Mort gonna do? And they've been talking about how Celaena is kind of bitter that Queen Elena saved her last book, but also like didn't save her parents. Like, if you could just be saving people, like maybe we could have stopped this, you know, a little earlier down the pipeline. But anyway, Mort decides to leave her with this. If I could leave you in peace, I would, but you have lived your life aware that you will never escape certain burdens. Whether you like it or not, you are bound to the fate of this world. As the king's champion, you are now in a position of power, and you can make a difference in the lives of many. Cain and the Rhetoric were just the beginning of the threat to Aurelia, Mort said, the words echoing around the tomb. There is a far deadlier power poised to devour the world. So, that's promising, that's exciting. Celaena is thrilled with this turn of events. But she's got work to do. She's a working girly, and so it's time for her to go tail Archer somewhere. She's going to go see what he's up to. This time she decides to bring Chaol. Chaol is essentially just an accessory for her, but we love it. He's a cute accessory. They're like walking around the streets of Rifthold, and they physically bump into him. And Archer friend calls her Lena, like a little cute nickname. And Chaol's immediately jealous. Immediately like, he's a nickname for you? Celaena later assures him that she does not like that nickname, but still. They like chat for a little bit. She updates him on how she's here, not in the salt mines, and he apologizes for what happened to Sam. Like, he's still like, he knows that they were buddies and was like, I'm so sorry that Sam was killed. And then they make dinner plans, and Chaol is obviously very, very jealous because he is. The next day, Celaena is mandated to go to this like fancy dinner, and she's sitting next to Chaol, and they're like chatting, and they're like staring at each other. She's mostly thinking about Dorian and really thinking about that promise of friendship that he offered and whether she can accept it or not. And Dorian, meanwhile, is glaring at Chaol and Celaena, at them making googly eyes at each other, and he's upset. And so he leaves early, and Celaena follows him. She's like, hey dude, what's up? Because the vibes are hostile. And Dorian is in a cranky mood. He's cranky because he's in love with Celaena, and now he's noticing that Celaena and Chaol maybe have some chemistry. And Celaena's like, okay, whatever. She tries talking to him and being like, hey, your cousin Roland has extremely bad vibes. And he's like, no, he's not. He does not have extremely bad vibes. He's totally fine. It's probably just you. And I think you just used me to become the king's champion. Like, you were just manipulating me. And Celaena's like, okay, dude. I want you to remember in your brain, both you and Dorian, both of you, to think about when she became king's champion. He came to her prison mines. She was a slave. He said, I want you to be my champion. He picked her up and, like, took her back to the palace. Like, okay, well, sorry, what was she supposed to do? What? I don't know. Dorian is being a little ridiculous in this situation. Anyway, Celaena's not thrilled with Dorian's answer, so she decides to go seek out some answers on her own, and she goes down to the dungeons to visit Kaltain. And I mentioned this briefly, but in the last book, we know Kaltain had like a crush on Dorian. She saw how close Celaena and Dorian were getting, and Duke Parrington used this as an opportunity to convince Kaltain that the best outcome of this situation would be for her to poison Celaena so that Cain could kill her and to get her out of the picture so Dorian would then be hers. But when it goes south and Celaena doesn't end up dead, the Duke throws her into the bus immediately. She ends up in the dungeons. So now she's down here. Celaena starts asking her questions about, like, Roland, and Kaltain is not doing well. We know that she was, like, addicted to opium beforehand, so she's going through withdrawals for that. She was never, like, totally sane, really. So being in the dungeon hasn't helped, and she's talking to Celaena about how, like, cold and miserable she is, and how the guards will look the other way, and men will come down and, like, assault her, and it's just, like, truly a miserable time. And she doesn't really have much information about Roland, except that he's, like, bad news. And Celaena was like, okay, well, I already knew that. But before she leaves, this is what happens. But Kaltain had already curled in on herself again, conserving as much warmth as she could. So Celaena didn't want to think how frigid the cell must be at night. She knew what it felt like to curl up like that, desperate for any kernel of warmth, wondering whether you'd wake up in the morning if the cold would claim you before then. Not giving herself the chance to reconsider, Celaena unfastened her black cloak. She threw it through the bars, aiming carefully to avoid the long, dried vomit that was caked onto the stones. She also heard about the girl's opium addiction being locked away without a fix had to have driven her close to insanity, if she wasn't already mad to begin with. Kaltain stared at the cloak that landed in her lap, and Celaena pivoted to return down the narrow, icy corridor and up to the warmer levels above. Sometimes, Kaltain said softly, and Celaena paused. Sometimes I think they brought me here, not to marry Parrington, but for another purpose. They want to use me. Use you for what? They never say, but when they come down here, they never tell me what they want. Okay, weird. Vibes are weird down in the dungeon. The next day, Celaena is doing breakfast in bed. Her and Nehemia seem to, like, hang out every morning before they, like, go do their royal tasks. They're having one of their usual breakfasts in bed, and Celaena is kind of recounting the events that had happened the night before with Kaltain. And while Nehemia is, like, horrified at the conditions, she's not surprised given the conditions of the salt mines that her people are enduring, kind of like the brutality she's seen from her people's hand. And Nehemia starts talking about, like, too bad that Terrasen, Celaena's home country, is gone. They were the best hope to stand against Ardelayne. And Celaena's like, yeah, that's too bad, but, like, they're gone. What are we gonna do? And Nehemia's like, okay, anyway, Roland's been assigned to monitor me. And so we're given insight that, like, they are becoming incredibly suspicious of Nehemia and whatever she's up to. Meanwhile, Dorian and Chaol are trying to like mend their bestie bromance by like hanging out at Dorian's puppy kennels. Yeah, that's right. Dorian has a hobby of raising puppies. Okay. That's cute and fun. And Chaol and him are hanging out there. Their bestie romance is really on the rocks because of the tension over Celaena, but like they're trying because they've been bestie bros for life and they should not let a girl come between them. That night, Celaena is going to have her dinner with Archer, and on her way out of the castle, she's wearing a very Scandi red dress, and on the way out of the castle, they have this encounter. And Chaol is like, you are not wearing that. And she's like, yeah, I am. And he's like, it's too cold. And she's like, I'm taking a carriage. And Chaol's like, where do you even hide your weapons in that thing? And she's like, I have weapons. Like, I have them hidden. Like, I literally do this professionally. I will see you tomorrow. Like, stop. And he's like, tomorrow? Because he is concerned that, one, he's not going to know if she's well until tomorrow, but also, like, what is she doing overnight? Like, why is she not coming back this evening? Archer, she goes to the dinner, and she has a very flirty dinner with Archer Finn. They, like, are chitting and chatting and, like, you know, flirting. They're, like, two hot people flirting. Okay, they're having a good time. And they decide to take his carriage back home, and he invites her to come home with him. And she's like, don't you want the night off? And he's like, it's different, like, when you choose, rather than, like, it being assigned to you. And she's like, that makes sense. And she asked him if he likes his life. And he's like, you know, it's not, like, terrible. I don't mind the work, but I do not like being indebted to Clarissa, the head of the courtesans. And I, like, my true wish is to be, like, free, to be free of all this. And Celaena says she had a flicker of memory from a time for just for a moment she had been free, when the world had been wide open and she had been about to enter it with Sam at her side. It was a freedom that she was still working for, because even though she had tasted it only for a heartbeat, it had been the most exquisite heartbeat she'd ever experienced. She took a steadying breath and looked at him in the eye. It was time. The king sent me to kill you. Archer obviously freaks out when he hears this, and he's like, whoa, Celaena, please don't kill me. I will pay you money. I've got so much money, I'll pay it to you. And she's like, don't worry, can you please calm down? Stop freaking out. It's gonna be fine. I'm gonna find a way to keep you alive, but you have to give me information about the rebels. Like, I will trade information for your life. And he's like, okay, I know a little bit, but there's this ball coming up, and I think if you go to this ball, you can really gather, like, a lot more information. I think this guy is, like, very strongly connected, and he tells her what he does know. He says, I've only heard my clients whispering about it every now and again, but there's a group that's formed right here in Rifthold, and they want to put Aelin Galathynius back on Terrasen's throne. Her heart stopped beating. Aelin Galathynius, the lost heir of Terrasen. Aelin Galathynius is dead, she breathed. Archer shook his head. They don't think so. They say she's still alive, and that she's raising an army against the king. She's looking to reestablish her court to find what's left of King Orlan's inner circle. And then the girlies went wild. The crowd went wild. Aelin Galathynius, this is our first mention of Aelin. If you, like me, came into this book, like, fairly recently, after reading A Court of Thorns and Roses, or, like, whatever, you probably heard the name Aelin being tossed around. And you read Throne of Glass, and you said, hey, besties, there's no one named Aelin in this book. So far what we know about Aelin is that she's the lost heir of Terrasen, that she's either dead or maybe not dead, and trying to raise an army, a rebel army against the king. We know very little about her at this point, but, like, oh my gosh, it's so exciting that she's been introduced. So Celaena leaves Archer, and she decides to stop by Chaol's room, and Chaol is still awake, so she, like, kind of relays the events of the night. Not all of them. Chaol has no idea that she's not killing these people, but she kind of talks about Archer and, like, gathering information from him and all this, and he's like, be careful, and she starts to get annoyed because she really views him telling her to be careful as viewing her as, like, incompetent. If, like, he's telling her be careful, he doesn't think that she can do it, and she doesn't love that because, like, clearly she's the coolest, she's the best, she's not incompetent. But he clarifies, and he says, but I worry because I care. So I will always tell you to be careful because I will always care what happens to you. Anyway, it's time for the ball. Good news, it's a masquerade ball. At this point, we have had at least one masquerade ball every single book at this point. I do think this trend stops after this book. I do think the number of masquerade balls drastically declines, which is a little bit upsetting. But anyway, this is a masquerade ball. Celaena is dressed as a swan, and Archer Finn is dressed as a wolf. And he's like, okay, I'm going to show you up to this guy's office where he keeps all of his secrets, papers, and things, and then you can investigate. And so he takes her up there, and Archer's like, okay, I'm going to leave you to investigate here. I have to go back. People will know I'm missing. Because, like, I'm hot stuff, obviously, if I am not at the party. So, like, talk to you later. You do what you need to do. And so Celaena is snooping, And she finds this book with word marks, those magical rune things, all over it. And it seems really important and really connected to this magic that has been used throughout the entire last book and that Cain was using to summon those demons. And she notices on the back, written in the common tongue, so not in word marks, that it says, "It is only with the eye that one can see rightly." And she's like, interesting. And she like makes a note of this, and she's still snooping, duping when who should come in but Davis. Davis is the owner of the house, and he comes in, and she tries to play it off as she like hears him messing with the lock, and so she's like, okay, she got a second to think. She tries to play it off as someone who is like very distraught. She tries to pretend she's like a crying girl who's just been like broken up with, and she says, "Oh, the housekeeper let me in here. She said it would be somewhere private where I could cry." And Davis initially is like, "Oh, okay, are you okay?" But very quickly has a knife held to her because he said, "No one has a key to my office, not even my housekeeper." And so he attacks her, and she's able to overtake him like pretty quickly. Obviously, she's Ardelan's assassin, but not before he cuts her with a knife, and the knife had Gloriella on it, which was the poison that was used the night that she was captured and taken to Endover. So she immediately recognizes the smell. But she is able to make quick work of him, kill him, and get out of there. But the Gloriella is already taking effect, and the Gloriella is a paralytic that will like essentially knock her unconscious and paralyze her, and so she's got to get going. She needs to get back to somewhere safe before the poison like paralyzes her. And the guards have heard stuff happening, and so they're storming things, and she's like running back to the castle as fast as she can, completely covered in Davis's blood. And she stumbles back to Chaol's room, a place where she feels safe, and she collapses. Chaol is freaking out. Obviously, she's completely covered in blood. He doesn't know that it's her blood, or it's not her blood, it's someone else's blood. And he can tell that she's been poisoned by something, but they don't know what she's been poisoned by. He sends one of the guards to investigate, and they're able to kind of like deduce what happened, and he's able to get her the antidote she needs and all of that. But he thinks to himself as he's kind of taking all of this, "I'm so glad that Davis is already dead, because otherwise I would have had to kill him." And as we know, Chaol takes killing people very seriously. Not that Celaena doesn't, but she's not as big of a wuss about it. In the morning, he relays this all to Celaena, and he's like, "I burnt your dress." And she's kind of like annoyed that he burnt her dress because it was a cute dress. It was covered in blood. She wouldn't have been able to re-wear it anyway. And he is like, "This is terrible. If the king found out like how close you came to getting caught, like you'd be in huge trouble." But he assures her that if anything happens, he's gonna take care of it. Like he's gonna take care of her. Sweet. Celaena, with the rest of her afternoon, is feeling a little like worse for the wear, but with the rest of the afternoon and evening decides to go to the library. She's a little nervous because the last time she was here, she had those like really scary vibes happen, but she's got to like investigate. And she's like looking through every corner. She's trying to find something that might like either help her with that little like message she saw in the back of that book last night, or kind of explain what had happened in the library a few nights earlier. She's like really looking through, and she thinks she might be out of luck when she comes across this like tapestry in the back dark corner of the library as the clock is striking midnight. And in this castle, like 50% of the tapestries hide secret doors. So luckily this one is one of the ones that has a secret door behind it. So she pulls the tapestry back. There is a secret door, and the secret door leads to this staircase. And this staircase, she's able to take her torch and light this like trail of oil that lights up the whole like staircase, and it just keeps going down and down and down. And it gives me the vibes of that moment in like National Treasure 2, I think. Where they go in the treasure room and they light the little things, and then the oil goes, and then it's treasure. Do you know what I'm talking about? If you don't, that was probably confusing. But if you do, you get the mental image. Anyway, she's down there, and initially she just thinks it's a bunch of records, that this is just like a records room, and she's like, castle records, blah, 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 blah. But then in the corner, there's this big iron door. She's like, "That's so weird. This looks like no other door in the palace. Like all the other doors are either wooden or glass, because remember, it's a glass castle." And she's like, "Oh my gosh, so strange." And it's like locked. And so we know about iron, and she knows about iron, that iron completely deadens magic, like suspicious. And so Celaena takes her dagger and slides it under the door and uses it kind of as a mirror to see if she can see what's under there. And the only thing she can see is it's really dark, but she sees some eyeballs, and it really scares her. But then she goes to look again, they're not there, and she's like, could have been anything. Could have been a rat, could have been, we don't know. Meanwhile, at the exact same moment when the clock strikes midnight, Dorian jolts awake, and he feels like his room is like freezing cold. He feels cold in his bones. He's like, ooh, the vibes are terrible and frigid. It's at the exact moment that Celaena found that door. So that's probably bad news. The next night, Celaena decides to go to dinner in the main hall. Normally she avoids going to dinner with everyone else in the main hall because she like truly does despise the king. So she like doesn't want to hang out with him if she doesn't have to. But tonight she's going because Renee Goldsmith is singing, and Celaena loves herself the performing arts. Like she does. She loves a singer, she loves a dancer, she loves all that sort of stuff. And so she's excited to go see some singing. She's a lover of beauty. And so Renee starts singing the song about this fae woman who is incredibly powerful but spends all these years lonely. All these guys are like taking her and wanting her only for her powers. And then finally she encounters a knight who loves her for who she really is, and she finally finds love. And it's really sweet. And Celaena starts to tear up, and then Chaol grabs her hand under the table. What a sweet little moment. Unfortunately, Dorian does see the exchange between Chaol and Celaena, and it hurts his feelings because he loved Celaena and she didn't love him back, and he's a little bit sad. But this is what he thinks in his little head while he's seeing this. He says he would move on because he would not be like the ancient kings in the song and keep her for himself. She deserved a loyal, brave knight who saw her for what she was and did not fear her. And he deserved someone who would look at him like that, even if the love wouldn't be the same, even if the girl wouldn't be her. So Dorian closed his eyes and took another long breath, and when he opened his eyes, he let her go. I'm sorry. Dorian is a little angel, man. I love this man. I would die for him. He's so sweet. Ah, what a little gem. Okay, hold that little warm gem moment in your heart because bad news is about to come. So that woman, unbeknownst to everyone else at the castle, that night Renee Goldsmith and all of her companions are executed by the king. Celaena, Chaol, Dorian don't know about this. But it is one of my favorite kind of things that is kind of woven throughout Throne of Glass particularly, but also is found in like ACOTAR, Crescent City as well, is you can tell that SarahJMaas has like a deep value for the arts, and also like really finds it important to highlight the ways in which like the arts are important in a rebellion, and there's like a wide array of roles in a rebellion, that it is not necessarily for everyone just to be committed to violence, but like that these artists need to keep around like the stories of hope and perseverance that allow like the people to keep their like eyes on the prize. I don't know. I think it's one of my favorite things ever. We will continue to see it throughout Throne of Glass. I think this is one of the first incidences of it really happening, where we really see her valuing art. And I'm going to read a pretty long chunk from this section because I really enjoy it. A queer, calm rage settled over Renee Goldsmith's lined face, and she lifted her chin. I have worked for 10 years to become famous enough to gain an invitation to this castle. 10 years so I could come here to sing the songs of magic that you tried to wipe out. So I could sing those songs and you would know that we are still here. That you may outlaw magic, that you may slaughter thousands, but we who keep the old ways still remember. Behind him, Roland snorted. Enough, the king said, and snapped his fingers. The guards shoved her head down on the block. My daughter was 16, she went on. Tears ran over the bridge of her nose and onto the block, but her voice remained strong and loud. 16 when you burned her. Her name was Celaena, and she had eyes like thunderclouds. I still hear her voice in my dreams. The king jerked his chin to the executioner, who stepped forward. My sister was 36. Her name was Liesa, and she had 2 boys who were her joy. The executioner raised his axe. My neighbor and his wife were 70. Their names were John and Estrelle. They were killed because they dared to try to protect my daughter when your men came for her. Renee Goldsmith was still reciting her list of the dead when the axe fell. It's breakfast time again, and Nehemia and Celaena are eating it together in her room, and Celaena decides to confess like everything to Nehemia. She had been telling her a lot, but she'd been holding some things back, so she tells her about the secret passage in her room. She tells her that she has not killed anyone off of this list, and she's like, come with me, I'm going to show you Queen Elena's tomb. And so she takes her down into the tombs. They come across this eye on the wall, and Celaena immediately connects it to that phrase that was on the back of the book at Davis's house, but like nothing really comes of it. And Nehemia is like really kind of dismissive of her wanting to investigate this phrase. She's like, that probably is just like some random note that guy wrote on the back of a thing. Like, I don't know why you're thinking about it that much. Nehemia, meanwhile, is spending her time down in the tunnels chatting with Mort about what he knew about magic, but honestly, he doesn't answer any questions. He's, like, very tricky in that you, like, really need to be very specific in the questions you're asking, otherwise he will not answer them. He can only answer, like, a series of questions, and if you don't ask them right, he can't answer them. He's kind of rude in that way. That night there is another ball, and Celaena is on guard duty, and she's kind of annoyed about it because Celaena loves a ball. She loves a pretty dress, she loves to dance, so, like, a ball is her favorite activity, but she sneaks away during one of the songs because, like, really, Everything's fine. She's like keeping an eye on things, sort of, but she wants to dance, and so she sneaks away and she's dancing in her little guard's outfit. She's like swirling around with her cape, and Chaol sees her, and Celaena thinks he's gonna come over and stop her, but instead he asks for a dance and they dance together, and it's very, very, very cute. It's very cute. And Celaena's dancing with him and like laughing with him, and she looks up at him and realizes that in that long moment, after 10 long years, Celaena looked at Chaol and realized she was home. Sorry, super sweet. While this is going on, unfortunately, Dorian is watching out the window. Nehemia catches him watching this happen out the window, and she sees that what he's looking at, and she's like, leave them alone, let them have this happiness together. We're royals, we have a different set of responsibilities, we have a different set of problems, like, she's not meant for you. We come with a lot of baggage. And Dorian's like, I've already moved on, like, don't even worry about it, I don't even love her anymore. And Nehemia's like, okay, cool. Anyway, I actually came over to you to talk about something like important and real. The slavery situation in Calcula right now, they're trying to expand the slave mine so even more people can be put in these terrible, terrible conditions. So like if you could step in and stop that, that would be awesome. And Dorian's like, that sounds incredibly messy. I don't think I will step in. And Nehemia's like, if Celaena was sent off to the slave mines, would you not do everything in your power to save her? Like, think about it. And Dorian's like, yeah, but that's different. Like, Celaena's like my bestie. And Nehemia's like, it's not different. Everyone at those mines have people who love them. And he's like, it really made him think, you know. Dorian is not a deep thinker. He loves reading, he really does. But like for a reader, he's not great at like really thinking outside of the present moment. He like is really living in the present. He does not really think outside of his own context very often. But before she leaves him, she says to him, you have power in you, Prince. More power than you realize. She touched his chest, tracing a symbol there too. And some of the court ladies gasped, but Nehemia's eyes were locked in on his. It sleeps, she whispered, tapping his heart. In here, when the time comes, when it awakens, do not be afraid. She removed her hand and gave him a sad smile. When it is time, I will help you. With that, she walked away, and the courtiers parting, and then swallowing up in her wake. He started after the princess, wondering what her last words had meant, and why, when she had said them, something ancient and slumbering deep inside of him had opened an eye. Okay, foreboding, we love it. So the next day, at a council meeting, they're looking at a map of Calcula. Dorian's cousin is bringing up the idea of expanding it so there can be more slaves put into the mines, and Dorian stands up and says he's in opposition to the expansion of the mines. He brings up all these points about like, where are they going to sleep? And they're like, Dorian, I don't think you understand how these mines work. We're not looking to take care of people. Like, these are brutal labor camps. They're not vacations. And he just like gets really mad and he leaves. He storms out of the room, and he's so upset that he in anger braces himself against a window and cracks it with magic power. He like puts a like perfectly round hole in the window, and the hallway is like frozen. The whole window is like icy and frosty, and the hallway is cold, and he can feel like the magic pulsing under his skin, and he's like uh-oh, SpaghettiOs, this is not good. But while that is happening, Chaol and Celaena are hanging out, and Celaena is joking that she wants cake. And Chaol stands up and he goes, and Celaena's like, where are you going? And he's like, I'm gonna go get you cake. Because this is like the orange peel theory of the day. You know, like orange peel theory, if you are not familiar currently, the moment on TikTok is that people will ask their boyfriends if he will peel an orange for them. And like, he's supposed to. He's supposed to peel it and like not ask follow-up questions, and that's like a good boyfriend will peel an orange for you. Okay, a good boyfriend will also go get you chocolate cake when you ask. And Celaena thinks back to a conversation she was having with Nehemia earlier that day. You know, the courts weren't always like this, Nehemia had said. There was a time when people valued honor and loyalty, when serving a ruler wasn't about obedience and fear. Do you think another court like that could ever rise again? Celaena hadn't wanted to give Nehemia an answer. She hadn't wanted to talk about it. But looking at Chaol now, at the man he was still becoming, she thought, yes. Yes, Nehemia, it could rise again if we find more men like Chaol. Okay, he just got you cake. Like, calm down a little bit, Babby, but like, we love it. Clearly, she's falling hard for this boy. She leaves, and a few hours later, she leaves with the leftover cake because, like, there were leftovers she's going to take with her. And she like bumps into Dorian on her way back to her room. He was kind of like pacing around waiting for her, and Dorian is looking crazed, a little hectic. And Celaena's like, are you okay? And he's like, I'm looking for Nehemia. I was hoping she was with you actually you guys were like out on a walk together. And Celaena's like, I actually haven't seen her tonight. Are you like cool? Are you fine? And Dorian's like, yeah, whatever. And Celaena says, for a heart, or thinks, This isn't her dog. For a heartbeat, there was something in his eyes that reminded her of a world long since burned, a glimmer of color and power that still stalked the edges of her nightmares. But he blinked and it was gone. Okay. Again, foreboding. What is happening with little Dory? I left, now I'm back. Actually, my camera died. Let's be honest. My camera died, I had to recharge it. It's a new day. And we are hanging out, or jumping right back into Crown of Midnight. Looking at the king now, Chaol was glad he had controlled himself. The line between him and Celaena was there for a reason. Crossing it could call into question his loyalty to the king before him, not to mention the way it would impact his friendship with Dorian. The prince had made himself scarce in this past week. Chaol would have to make a point to go see him today. Dorian and the king were where his loyalty lay. Without his loyalty, he was no one. Without it, he'd given up his family, his title, for nothing. So I think we're seeing Chaol, as I will continue to hammer in, really emphasizing how much loyalty is incredibly important to him. It's like one of his core values, maybe his singular core value, and his primary loyalty lies with Dorian. And so once again, his feelings for Celaena are beginning to impede on this friendship, loyalty relationship he has with Dorian. And his relationship with his bestie bro Dorian is top tier, and he wants to keep it that way. The next morning, Chaol gets taken into a castle staff meeting. Like I said, Chaol actually, I think I mentioned this, is Chaol has a lot more to do this book. Last book I felt like he really didn't have a job. His job was just hanging out with Celaena. This book he has to go to a lot of meetings. There's a lot of meetings this book. Staff meeting. And so he's there, the king's there, Duke Parrington's there, Roland's there, and they are just kind of chatting. There is going to be a carnival that I think is for Colin's birthday, Dorian's little brother. And just an increased need for security during this carnival, because all sorts of creepy, scary things tend to come in with the carnival. The carnival has some weirdos, some people who might not be in love with the crown. And so they're just chatting about a need for increased security for that. And then the king also mentions that Princess Nehemia needs to be watched carefully because there was a threat made on her life. And Chaol's like, oh my gosh, let me, okay, I will make sure to let her and her personal security know. And the king's like, don't tell her. And Chaol's like, that's weird, but you're the boss, so I'm going to do what you say. And he's also like, oh, I then also cannot tell Celaena about this threat on Nehemia's life, because he knows if he tells Celaena, Celaena's immediately going to go and tell Nehemia. And so in order to keep it from Nehemia, he also needs to keep it from Celaena. And Dorian is just walking around, and as Roland's leaving the meeting, he bumps into Dorian, and Roland apologizes for pushing the stuff about the slave mines to be expanded. He didn't realize it was a sensitive topic for Dorian. He kind of tries to make nice and smooth things over. That afternoon, Dorian is outside looking at the carnival tents that is being set up when he bumps into Chaol and Celaena. Chaol and Celaena are walking together. He's obviously immediately grumpy about this, because he's not loving the dynamics he's sensing between Chaol and Celaena. But Celaena is sticking her hands into tents and just up to Celaena type behavior. And Chaol keeps being like, hey, stop it, cut it out, you're gonna get your hand bitten off. She doesn't stop it, obviously. They come across this old woman with sharp iron teeth. Welcome to the stage, Baba Yellowlegs. Dorian immediately is like, oh, this is a witch. He thinks of the stories he's heard of the Witch Kingdom, and we get kind of a little recap of some basic witch knowledge. If you've read Assassin's Blade, you've already gotten this, but we'll recap it for you. Essentially, there are two main types of witches, the Iron Teeth and the Crescent witches. And the Crescent witches are the nicer witches, and the Iron Teeth are the more ruthless, brutal, violent witches. And a while ago, I think around the same time the Empire was being taken over, so around 10 to 15 years ago, the Crescent witches were completely taken over. All of their lands were taken over by the Iron Teeth. But when the Iron Teeth witches took over, the Crescent witches put a curse on the land that the soil would bear no fruit, and then the Crescent witches scattered to the winds. We don't know where the Crescent witches are. They're all over the place, and the Iron Teeth are now the only ones in what is now known as the Western Wastes, and it's a bad time. And so this old woman introduced herself. Yeah, she's Baba Yellowlegs, and Yellowlegs is one of the groups. There's 3 main groups in the Witch Kingdom, and Yellowlegs is one of them. And she says that she is the last born witch from the Witch Kingdom. So I guess, actually, now that I think about it, the witch takeover may have been in 500 years ago. And Baba Yellowlegs is like, hey, girlie, she points at Celaena and is like, you want to come in my wagon so I can tell your future? And Chaol's like, absolutely not. Don't go in there. That's a truly terrible idea. And Celaena's even no, that seems like a truly terrible idea. And Dorian's like, I think she might just be an old lady dressed up in a costume. Actually, the more I look at her, the more I'm like, you're not a real witch. Celaena is freaked out by this. Celaena is like, yeah, I'm not going to go alone with you. And Celaena's not freaked out by much. But she learned about the witches in Assassin's Blade and knows that they are bad news. And she's like, you are a witch. I will not be hanging out with you alone in your caravan. And then Baba Yellowlegs is like, okay, if no one wants our fortunes read, then please leave me alone. Before Baba Yellowlegs pieces out, she turns to Celaena and she says, hide from fate all you like, but it shall soon find you. Which, again, foreboding. We have, like, a lot of... Celaena just, like, keeps getting foreboding news. So does Dorian. Chaol does not. Chaol's just vibing. So they decide to leave the carnival because Baba Yellowlegs kind of just, like, put a bad vibe over everything, and they go to the stables. And at the stables... Dorian's like, I'm gonna go ahead and give you your birthday present a couple days early. And he presents Chaol with a black Assyrian stallion. Chaol is like, this is far too nice of a gift. Like, an Assyrian stallion is just like it's the nicest horse you can get. It is like the horse of royalty. And then Celaena's like, one time I had an Assyrian mare. And Dorian's like, how? They're like crazy expensive, like even more expensive than the stallions or the mares. And Celaena's like, I stole him from the Lord of Xandria. It's kind of like her Alexis Rose moment. You know, if you've watched Schitt's Creek, Alexis Rose will just, like, drop these, like, celebrity lore, where she'll be like, yeah, I know how to do that because I was kidnapped by a Saudi Arabian prince for 3 months, and I had to learn Arabic. It's, like, a similar vibe to that. And then Dorian asks Chaol, like, what are your birthday plans? And Celaena's like, oh, we have plans. I'm doing something. And Dorian's like, this is terrible. Like, he's visibly like, okay, trying to play it cool, but he's not cool at all. Celaena decides to go back down to the tomb alone, and she's still trying to figure out this, like, little riddle with the eye. And so she's trying to use the Eye of Elena, her necklace, in the wall. And she's, like, sticking the gemstone in the eyeball hole and being like, and it's not working. And she tries asking Mort about it, but he still says she's asking the wrong questions. Mort is the most unhelpful little guy. We love him. He's a fun little guy, but he's unhelpful in all ways. That night, Celaena has this dream, and she dreams of this, like, big ravine, and she has the same dream every single year on this day, and it's of a big ravine. She's standing on one side, and the white stag of Terracin is standing on the other side. And it looks just like the stag she spotted on her way to Endover. Like, this is clearly, like, the stag of Terracin, and she tries to step closer to it, but, like, immediately she's at the edge of the ravine, and, like, rocks are tumbling off, and, like, if she keeps going, she's gonna fall in a ravine. Like, there's no way for her to get to the other side. And this is how the ravine is described. There was no end to the darkness from that ravine. No end, no beginning either. It seemed to breathe, pulsing with the whispers of faded memories, forgotten faces, and sometimes it felt as though the darkness stared back at her, and the face it wore was her own. The stag had come closer, his head now angled as if inviting her to join him. But the ravine only seemed to grow wider, like the maw of a giant beast, opening to devour the world. Okay, foreboding. So she wakes up from this dream. It's the dream she has every single night on the anniversary of her parents' death. And so she wakes up, she's in a bad mood, and she says, I need to go. Like, me and the doggy need to get out of here and just, like, not be in the palace today. So she pieces out, like, before dawn. Then Chaol goes to go get her for the morning run, like their usual morning ritual, and she's missing. And so he bumps into Nehemia, and he asks her, because, like, they like to hang out in the morning and have their, like, breakfast in bed. And he's like, hey, do you know where Celaena is? And she's like, oh, she's probably, like, gone. It's the 10th anniversary of her parents' death, so, like, I'm sure she didn't want to hang out in the castle where the king was that, like, was responsible for their deaths. So she probably left. And Chaol has known the story of her parents. She told him in the last book that her parents were killed, and she was, like, there. She, like, woke up in their bed with their blood. Oh, fun. But she didn't know that she was only 8 when they died. And so he's like, I don't know, there's just, like, another layer of him being like, wow, she has, like, a lot of trauma. Like, a lot. Meanwhile, we catch up with Celaena. Celaena and her doggy Fleetfoot have fled to the foothills around Rifthold, so they're out in the, like, forest a little bit. And she remembers that this date, so the date of her parents' death, was the day that she had tried to escape Endover the year prior. And she, like, kind of talks through the day's events from her perspective. We had only heard this story kind of retold to us from the boys' perspective. And so this is the first time we're seeing it from Celaena's perspective. It was the day she tried to, like, escape Endover, but essentially it was an attempt to end her life. She killed several guards on the way out, but, like, primarily was looking to kill guards that had just been brutal, that had caused her or the people around her undue violence. And she had, like, carefully planned her exit, and she knew she wanted to leave, like, mid-afternoon because the light would be low and she was coming up from the mine, so she knew it would take her a second to adjust. And at night there was, like, a ton of guards, so she knew she couldn't go at night. But if she tried to go in the morning when the light was the brightest, she knew she, like, would be blind essentially. So she was, like, carefully planning that day, and she knew that the king had ordered all the guards to keep her alive for as long as possible, but she felt like they would have no choice but to kill her if she like got rid of enough, if she killed enough guards, or if she got close enough to the wall. But that day ended the same way it had begun. She ended up in chains back in the salt mines. And she finally gets back home in the evening. Chaol is waiting for her in her bedroom. And she says to him as she like walks in, if you're trying to figure out what to say to me, don't bother. There's nothing that can be said or done. And Chaol says, let me just keep you company. And Celaena's like, I don't want company. And Chaol thinks to himself that, like, he probably wouldn't be the best company anyway, because, like, he's someone who works for the king. Like, Nehemia would probably be better company because they are both people who have just been brutalized by the Empire. But he wants Celaena to turn to him. Like, he wants to be the one to comfort her. And he pulls out a chocolate cake. He brought a chocolate cake because obviously Celaena loves chocolate cake. And then Celaena says to him, I can't tell if I should be ashamed of wanting to hold you on this day or grateful that despite what happened before, it somehow brought me to you. Okay. Girlie is down bad. Like, down bad for Chaol. Meanwhile, Dorian is not having a cutie time with Celaena. He's in the library, digging through old books and family records, trying to find some mention of magic, because remember how he, like, broke that window with, like, ice power? He's, like, trying to figure out what's happening, and he hasn't been able to, he, like, still hasn't found Nehemia to, like, talk to her yet. You can find no mention of magic in their family lineage, except, like, when Queen Elena had married into the line, and he's like, I don't know what to do. And so he starts to investigate King Brannon, Queen Elena's father, and the first king of Terrasen, and he, like, learns a little bit more about Terrasen. He's not, I love Dorian. Dorian is a sweet baby, precious angel gemstone. But he, like, as a prince goes, like, he doesn't do a great job. Has his father tried to make him into a good prince? No, obviously. But, like, learning about the countries around you might be, like, a great starting point for being a prince. Anyway, he doesn't know much about Terrasen, so he starts to learn about this country, and he learns that they have, like, a ton of magic. They have a ton of power, but they never used it to, like, impede on other countries. They only used it to better their own country and to protect their borders. And it's just, like, a very different motto than his father's motto when it comes to ruling. And then he thinks to himself, if the heir of Terrasen, Aelin Galathynius, had lived, would she have become a friend, an ally, his bride, perhaps? He'd met her once, in the days before her kingdom had become a charnel house. The memory was hazy, but she had been a precocious wild girl, and had set her nasty, brutish older cousin on him in order to teach Dorian a lesson for spilling tea on her dress. Dorian rubbed his neck. Of course, as fate would have it, her cousin would wound up being Aedion Ashriver, his father's prodigy general and the fiercest warrior of the north. He'd met Aedion a few times over the years, and at each encounter with the haughty young general, he'd gotten the distinct impression that Aedion wanted to kill him. I just love that Aelin and Dorian did meet once when they were children. That's just, like, a fun fact to me, because Aelin is, like, kind of like the thing that is looming over this book, right? We, like, keep hearing whispers of, like, Aelin Galathynius and how the rebels are, like, trying to, like, find her so she can raise up an army. And I love that Dorian and her had, like, a cute little meet and greet when they were little kids. Dorian's like, oh, I need to go see Chaol briefly since it's his birthday. This is actually the next day. Sorry, I told you it was the same day as Celaena's parents' death. It's not. It's the next day. Her parents died, and then Chaol was born. Boop, boop. Dorian's like, I should at least go see Chaol because it's his birthday before he goes off to whatever he's doing with Celaena. Not that I care. I don't care at all because I've let go of Celaena. Remember everyone? Remember everyone? Everyone remember when I told Nehemia I let her go? I was not even lying. Then all the books start flying off the shelves and swirling around him and, like, flying all over, because turns out he did care, and it really freaks Dorian out. But what freaks him out even more is he can feel the magic, like, pulsing under his skin. Like, this is very stressful. I found no real helpful mentions of magic, and the magic is, like, it's here. It's here. And so he decides the best course of action is to seek out Baba Yellowlegs because she'll maybe be able to tell him something. Anyway, so the dumbest boy in all the land trophy goes to Dorian. Remember how everyone was scared of that witch, including Celaena? Yeah, it seems like maybe you shouldn't go talk to her. Also, like, if anyone knew Dorian had magic, like, it would be very, very, very dangerous for him. I was just like, bless this boy's sweet little heart. But, like, come on. Come on. Meanwhile, Celaena takes Chaol to his birthday surprise. She set up this really beautiful birthday dinner for him in this greenhouse, and Chaol's like, oh, it's like the Fae Woman's Garden from Renee Goldsmith's songs, and it's just like there's lights everywhere. I don't know how there are string lights. Is there electricity in Rifthold? I don't know. Don't ask me. Maybe they're gas-powered string lights? I don't know. We don't need to know, maybe. Maybe that's just for our imaginations to hold. But it's a beautiful little setup. Celaena's like, I know it's not much, but, like, and Chaol is like, no one has ever done anything for me like this, so, like, this feels like a lot. Celaena had paid for someone to make them dinner and serve them, and they're served all these courses, and Chaol like, no one has thrown you a birthday party since I was a child. Celaena's like, it's not really a party. And Chaol says, it's the best gift I've ever been given. And Celaena's like, Dorian got you an Astarian mare literally 3 days ago. And he said, but Dorian doesn't know what my favorite stew is, does he? He glanced up at her and she bit her lip. How long have you been paying attention? Rereading this immediately after Throne of Glass, I realized how much deeper Chaol and Celaena's relationship is. Like, this is such a sweet moment. To be loved is to be known. And like, Celaena, I feel like loves incredibly well and deeply. Like, she loves her people fiercely when she decides that her people, and she's loving Chaol like well, to like notice these things and to set up this like elaborate birthday dinner. It's just like so sweet. And Celaena's thinking to herself while this is happening, did his parents have any idea that in the entire castle, in the entire kingdom, there was no one more noble and loyal than him? That boy they'd thrown out of their lives had become the sort of man kings and queens could only dream of having served in their courts. The sort of man she hadn't believed existed. Not after Sam. Not after everything that had happened. Like, girly is just like, she's head over heels in love with this boy. She is in love with this boy. Anyway, they like are having dinner. They've like finished their last course, which is obviously chocolate cake. And Celaena decides that she's going to confess everything to this boy. Which is like a risk. Chaol could just like immediately turn her into the king, but she confesses she hasn't actually been assigned the people. She hasn't been killing the people she's been assigned to kill. And Chaol freaks out. He's immediately like, he must have heard her incorrectly because there was no possible way that she could have been that brash, that foolish, that insane, and idealistic and brave. She's like, she's an idiot, but she's an idealistic, brave little idiot. And Chaol is like, the king is going to kill you. Actually, the king is probably going to have me kill you because he knows we have a relationship. Like, this is such bad news, Celaena. He says, it's only a matter of time. He has spies who are watching everything. And Celaena goes, and you'd rather I'd kill innocent men? Those men are traitors to the crown. Traitors, she barked out a laugh. Traitors for refusing to grovel before a conqueror, for sheltering escaped slaves trying to get home, for daring to believe in a world that is better than this God's forsaken place. She shook her head, some of her hair escaping. I will not be his butcher. And he hadn't wanted her to be. From the second she had been crowned champion, he had been sick at the thought of her doing what the king had commanded her to do. But this, he's like so afraid for her. Like, he just is. Like, it's not, I don't think he's like mad at her betrayal at all, really. He's just scared that she's going to get hurt. And she explains that she's been using Archer Finn, the guy that she is currently like commissioned to kill, for information that she hopes she can use to shorten her contract with the king. So her current plan is to be long gone by the time the king figures out she's a traitor. She's going to leave Rifthold and like go far, far away to a place they've never even heard of Ardaline. And Chaol knows that if she leaves, she's never going to return. Like, she's gone. And he's like, she's gonna fall in love with someone else and like she's gonna get married. Like, she's a catch. Like, obviously someone's gonna snatch her right up. And so Chaol says to her after she like says all this, he says, we will find that place. I will go with you. And Celaena goes, you love your country. I can't let you give that up. I would be the greatest fool in the world to let you go alone. Okay, we're gonna pause for just a second here because, oh my god, a lot to unpack in that. So one, I love the fact that even though Celaena thinks this country and this kingdom and this empire is the worsty worst, she doesn't want to like betray Chaol's central pillar, which is loyalty to his kingdom, because she knows he is a good man, but she also knows that his loyalty and his job are incredibly important to him. They are like central pillars in his life. And so she's like, no, I think that's really beautiful. And also when Chaol says, I would be the greatest fool in the world to let you go, this is like a callback to earlier when Celaena says to him, she was the greatest fool in the world if she chose Roland over Yo, when Chaol is telling the story of why he punched Roland in the face. Like, so cute. Anyway, then Celaena starts crying, and Chaol's like, oh my gosh, are you okay? What's wrong? And she says, I'm crying because you remind me of how the world ought to be, what the world can be. Again, she's down really bad. They, after the birthday dinner, go to bed together, and wake up and talk about their feelings, and it's just like so sweet and cute. Okay, this is my Celaena Chaol soapbox. I think they like sort of work. The first time I read this, I don't think I was like very much team Chaol and Celaena like in these first 2 books, but I think they like kind of work well together. I think Chaol is absolutely at his best when he's with Celaena because she calls into question his moral rigidity and this like strong alliance to the crown for why. But I also think Chaol is great for Celaena because he treats her with, he like recognizes her power. I don't know if he fully He definitely doesn't fully see like the scope of her ability, but he recognizes it to the extent that she showed it to him, and he still treats her with tenderness. Like, he still tells her to be careful because it's like a sign of care, and I don't think she's experienced being cared for in this way since she was like a child. And she like often talks about being with Chaol as like feeling like being home, and I think it is like a recollection of this like sense of being cared for. I think even with Sam, one, she didn't have that long with Sam before Sam was, and also Sam and her were like at the same level. Like, she in a lot of ways took care of Sam. Like, Sam tried to take care of her as well, but there wasn't this like consistent level of care. And I also don't think Sam challenged her in the same way that Chaol did. And I think also just because of like where she's grown to at this point, she's able to be a lot more vulnerable with Chaol than she was ever able to get to with Sam, just because, you know, they ran out of time. I think they really work well together. I think they make each other better. They challenge each other to really interrogate their own frameworks for understanding their own worldviews. And I'm just like, on this reread, I was like, wow, they kind of really work. I also love that like her love language is like clearly gifts. I know love languages are like kind of made up, but like Celaena's is like clearly like, gifts, and I love that he's always bringing her chocolate cake, and for her to make this like grand gesture for his birthday. I don't know, it's cute. I love it. Okay. Back to the dumbest boy in all the land, Dorian, who is now visiting Baba Yellowlegs. This is like the next day, and he shows up. She shows up, and he's like, she's at lunch, and she's like, at lunch I charge double, and like Dorian pays her like a ton of money. I think, I don't know, it's always confusing to me, the money systems in fantasy novels. I need like a conversion table at the beginning of the book. Like, what does $10 mean? He gives her like 9 coins, I think. Okay, that doesn't sound like a lot to me. 9 coins could be like, you know, less than $1 here. I don't know. If someone could provide a currency translation chart, that would be super helpful. Anyway, Dorian's like, this will pay for your discretion. And Baba Yellowlegs is like, sure. LOL. And Dorian's like, are you really a witch? And Baba Yellowlegs is like, yes, 500 years ago. And he's like, oh my gosh, you've been gifted the immortality of the Fae. And she's like, the Fae or the Valg. Remember Valg, because, oh, it'll come up again. And Dorian is like, is magic really gone? And Baba Yellowlegs says to him, your kind of magic is gone, but there are other forgotten powers. There are other more ancient powers that are still around. And Dorian's like, tell me more. And Baba Yellowlegs is like, no, Lordling. I love it. And then Dorian says, could someone maybe have magic powers? Like, maybe. Like, 'cause hypothetically, if I had a friend who maybe definitely, not me, like definitely a friend, who hypothetically had magic ice powers, could that like maybe be a thing? And Baba Yellowlegs is like, you should figure out why magic left in the first place to figure out, like, why there's still magic remaining. Like, that might help you. And Dorian's like, that's not helpful, but okay, thank you, ma'am. And he leaves, and then he bumps into Roland on the way out, and he's like, hey, Roland, I just got my fortune read by Baba Yellowlegs. And that's all we see from that, but, like, probably Roland's not going to do great things with that information. Celaena, meanwhile, is trying to do her job. She's trying to put in the work, and she goes down to the docks, and she finds all the information that all of the people that Archer Finn has given her on the list. All of them. All the people she's been gathering information on are on boats leaving. And she bumps into Archer, and Archer's like, sorry, I had to warn them that you were, like, looking into them. And Celaena's like, you know, like, the information is, like, part of the bargain of keeping you alive. Like, if I have nothing to give the king, we're in trouble. And she's like, honestly, like, maybe I should just kill Archer. She, like, thinks this in her head. It's an inside thought. She doesn't say it out loud. She says, maybe I should just kill Archer, because that would, like, keep Chaol safe, and, like, they would just, like, prevent this from, like, totally spiraling and untangling. But she doesn't. She refrains herself, and she says, okay, Archer, you need to bring me a new list of names by tomorrow morning, or I'm going to cut your head off. Okay, XOXO. And then she leaves. She says, man. And then we, like, check in on Chaol and Celaena, and they're just, like, deeply madly in love with each other, and they're, like, kissing each other every chance they have. This is a quote that I pulled. And every night since then, he'd trace the scars down her back, silently swearing oath after oath that someday he'd go back to Endover and rip that place down stone by stone. They, like, she's, like, literally, like, pulling him out of meetings and into broom closets. Like, that's the vibes of those two. I think that evening, Celaena is in Nehemia's room, and she's just spilling all of the tea on Chaol. She's like, Chaol is so cute. He's so fun. We had such a great time. He's so great. And Nehemia's like, that is so awesome for you. Also, the king told me I need to talk down the rebel forces, or he's gonna kill them. And he's also sending Duke Parrington to Moranth, which is in the very south of the country, right by Elway, probably to keep an eye on Elway and what is happening down there. And Celaena's like, so are you going to go back to Elway to kind of like monitor the situation down there? And Nehemia's like, no, there's stuff I need to do here. She's like, but promise me you will help me free my country. And Celaena's like, I'm just an assassin. And so Nehemia's like, with your help, we can gather an army that will help, like, that will be able to defeat the king. And Celaena's like, no, if I help, it'll just create more violence. You will end up getting hurt. People I love will end up getting hurt. And Nehemia is like, what will you stand for, or will you only stand for yourself? And Celaena is like, he is too powerful. Like, you haven't seen his, like, true brutality. And Nehemia goes, what will move you to act? He massacred 500 of my people last book. She doesn't say last book. That was my addition. And then Celaena's like, he destroyed Terrasen, my people, even though it was the strongest kingdom in the land. What hope do we have? And like, now his armies and his military is even more vast. And Nehemia says to her, I'm going to read you, this is kind of long, apologies. When will you say enough, Celaena? What will make you stop running and face what is before you? If Endover and the plight of my people cannot move you, what will? I am one person chosen by Queen Elena, one person whose brow burned with a sacred mark on the day of that duel, one person who despite the odds is still breathing. Our paths cross for a reason. If you are not God's blessed, then who is? This is ridiculous. This is folly. Folly to fight for what is right, for people who cannot stand up for themselves. You think soldiers are the worst he can send? Nehemia's tone softened. There are far darker things gathering on the horizon. My dreams have been filled with shadows and wings, the booming of wings soaring between the mountain passes. And every scout and spy we send into the White Fang Mountains, into the Farian Gap, does not come back. Do you know what the people say in the valleys below? They say they can hear wings too, riding the winds through the gaps. I don't understand a word you're saying, but Celaena had seen that thing outside the library. Nehemia stalked towards her, grabbing her by the wrists. You do not understand. When you look at him, you sense that there is a greater, twisted power around him. How did such a man conquer so much of the continent so quickly? With military might alone? How is it that Terrasen's court fell so quickly when its retainers had been trained for generations to be warriors? How did the most powerful court in the world get wiped out within a matter of days? If we do not strike now, Nehemia went on, then whatever he is brewing will only grow more powerful, and then we will be beyond any chance of hope. There is no hope, Celaena said. There is no hope in standing against him, not now, not ever. That was a truth she had slowly been realizing. If Nehemia and Elaine were right about this mysterious power source, then how could they ever overthrow him? And I will not be part of whatever plan you have. I will not help you to get yourself killed and bring down everyone, even more innocent people in the process. You will not help because all you care about is yourself. And so what if I do? Celaena splayed her arms. So what if I want to spend the rest of my life in peace? There can never be any peace, not while he reigns. When you said you weren't killing the men on the list, I thought you were finally taking a step towards making a stand. I thought when the time came, I could count on you to help me start planning. I didn't realize that you were doing it just to keep your own conscience clean. Celaena began storming towards the door. Nehemia clicked her tongue. I didn't realize that you were just a coward. Celaena looked over her shoulder. Say that again. Nehemia didn't flinch. You're a coward. You are nothing more than a coward. Celaena's fingers clenched into fists. When your people are lying dead around you, she hissed, don't come crying to me. Okay. So they had this like pretty brutal fight because Nehemia really is seeing Celaena's resistance to doing anything as this true like cowardice in the face of overwhelming oppression, especially when Nehemia views that Celaena could make like an impact and could make a substantial difference. And then next we get chapter 25, and this is like the entire chapter 25. I'm going to read you the whole thing. I'm not going to explain too much because you're not supposed to get it right now. You're not supposed to get it. One of them has to break, the queen said to the princess. Only then can it begin. I know, the princess said softly, but the prince isn't ready. It has to be her. Then do you understand what I am asking of you? The princess looked up, towards the shafts of moonlight spilling into the tomb. When she looked back at the ancient queen, her eyes were bright. Yes, then do what needs to be done. The princess nodded and walked out of the tomb. She paused on the threshold, the darkness beyond beckoning to her, and she turned back to the queen. She won't understand, and when she goes over the edge, there will be nothing to pull her back. She will find her way back. She always does. Tears formed, but the princess blinked them away. For all of our sakes, I hope you are right. Okay, foreboding. A few days later, Chaol is at a hunting party, and he's not having a good time. Chaol hates hunting parties. He says, this sucks. I hate it. But he's like hanging out, and he winds up like talking with the king. And the king comes up to him to let him know that he plans to question Nehemia tomorrow night and wants 6 additional guards stationed outside of the room to make sure that there are absolutely no interruptions, and that he does not want Nehemia to be notified of this ahead of time. So Chaol is like, again, I cannot tell Celaena about this because if I tell Celaena, Celaena will immediately tell Nehemia. And then he bumps into Dorian, and Dorian is like, I haven't seen you around. And Chaol is immediately like, I just been kind of busy, and he's like sweating and he's really nervous because Celaena and him have decided to hide the relationship from Dorian because they're worried that it's going to hurt Dorian's feelings. And Dorian just turns to Chaol and he says, treat her well. Sorry. I love Dorian. He's like a sweet little sweetheart, but sometimes I'm like, okay. And this is why I'm also like, girly, SarahJMaas, you want us to believe that this boy is the boy that's just like sleeping with everyone in the castle. I just don't see it. I don't see it. That night, Chaol and Celaena are like hanging out, and he doesn't tell Celaena about the king's plan, not about the threats nor the questioning. He knew that Celaena was not going to be able to stop it. Like, if the king wants to question Nehemia, he's gonna question Nehemia, and he's worried that she would put herself in danger trying to step in. And so he decides not to tell her. And then he goes out to the garden, and he's thinking about Celaena as he just like goes on a night stroll. And he thinks to himself, he'd kill any man who hurt Celaena. And if that king ever gave him the order to dispatch her, then he'd plunge his sword into his own heart before he'd obey. His soul was bound to hers by some unbreakable chain. He snorted, imagining what his father would think when he learned that Chaol had taken Ardalan's assassin for his wife. The thought stopped Chaol dead in his tracks. She was only 18. He forgot that sometimes. Forgot that he was older than her, too. And if he asked her to marry him right now, God's above, he muttered, shaking his head. That day was a long way off, but he couldn't help imagining it, the glimmer of a future, and how it would be to forge a life together, to call her his wife, to hear her call him husband, to raise a brood of children who would probably be far too clever and talented for their own good, and for Chaol's sanity. He was still envisioning that impossibly beautiful future when someone grabbed him from behind and pressed something cold and reeking against his nose and mouth, and the world went black. Okay. I just love that Chaol is like daydreaming of their future, and he's thinking about their kids and how the kids are going to be like Celaena, how they're going to be just like too smart for their own good. I'm sorry, that's so cute. It's so cute. I love it. Sorry, and you hate this man? You hate this man. Okay. Anna wakes up and she immediately realizes Chaol's gone. And honestly, she's like a little bit relieved because she did not want to go running this morning, and she figured he probably got called away for some like duty. And she's like, sick. I don't have to go on a run this morning. Archer had delivered another list via courier, so she did not have to chop his head off. Good news. So she did some investigating work of that. She didn't look for Nehemia because they had their big blowout fight yesterday, and so she's trying to let that blow over. She's like having a solo day, but then hours pass and she still hasn't seen Chaol around the castle at all. Like, Chaol hasn't been anywhere. And so she goes to Chaol's room. She finds a note, and it says, "We have the captain. When you're tired of stalking us, come find us here. Bring no one, or the captain will die before you set foot in the building. If you fail to arrive by tomorrow morning, we'll leave what's left of him on the banks of the Avery." And she, like, immediately starts thinking about Sam. Like Sam, Chaol was admired by almost everyone, and when they'd taken Sam from her, it hadn't been because of anything Sam had done. No, they had done it to get after her. And, like, once again, this nightmare scenario is replaying itself. This man that she loves is being taken from her because of something she did, because of who she is, not because of anything they did. And so she goes into full, like, we have not seen Ardalan's assassin. Like, we've seen this, like, really subdued, having a pretty nice time version of Celaena, and we see true, like, Celaena Sardothien, Ardalan's assassin, come out. Every one of the restraints she'd locked into place after she'd rampaged through Endover snapped free. An icy, endless rage swept through her, wiping away everything except the plan that she could see with brutal clarity. The killing calm, Arobin Hamel had once called it. Even he had never realized how calm she could get when she went over the edge. If they wanted Ardalan's assassin, they'd get her, and word helped them when she arrived. We love it. Meanwhile, Chaol is chained up at a warehouse that's full of hooded men who are armed to the teeth, and they're all just like standing around waiting for something. And he's like, I wonder what they're waiting for. And then he hears one of the hooded men say, she has until dawn. She'll show up. And Chaol's like, oh no, that's definitely Celaena. Like, that's the only girl they could be talking about. Chaol goes, if you hurt her, I'll rip you apart with my bare hands. You so much as touch her, I'll gut you. And they're like, okay, dude, you're chained up in the corner right now, so not too scary. And the guy, and Chaol, like, kind of realizes that these are the rebel group that Celaena has been, like, monitoring. And Chaol is like, I don't think you know who you're dealing with. And the guys are like, we know who you are. You're captain of the Royal Guard. Like, calm down, sir. We know you. And Chaol is like, I wasn't talking about me. And then one of the guys is like, she's just one girl. And then Chaol is like, then you're really in for a surprise. And boy, are they. because Celaena's in a mood now. Her rage took her to a place where she only knew 3 things: that Chaol had been taken from her, that she was a weapon forged to end lives, and that if Chaol was hurt, no one was going to walk out of that warehouse. Okay. So she's on the warehouse roof, and she's like, just kind of like, you know, spying on everything, looking at everything. I love this line, so I'm going to read it too. We're just reading you a lot from this section because it's good. She tipped her head back and gave the moon a wicked smile. She'd been called Ardalan's assassin for a reason. Dramatic entrances were practically her art form. So she's going to pop in from the ceiling. She jumps in a window. And she says she had made a jump like this once before on the night when her world had been completely shattered. But on that night, Sam had already been dead for days, and she had left through the window of Roque Farron's house for pure revenge. This time she would not fail. And so, like, she's thinking of Sam as she's jumping into this building. And she immediately just starts literally murdering everyone. Like, no one stands a chance. Like, all the men are just running because she's just, like, leaving bodies behind her. She was a whirlwind of steel and blood. Like, the men are like, whoa, that's enough. Like, and she is not stopping. And the guy takes off his hood, and he's like an unarmed old guy, and he's like, look, maybe we made a bad call kidnapping your boyfriend, but like, we have the same enemies. Like, we have bigger enemies out there. Like, we're both anti the king. And Celaena's like, there are no bigger enemies out there because I'm here now. Celaena does not give a flying F about any of this because she wants her Chaol back. She does call him her Chaol. And that's really cute. And then all of a sudden, Archer shows up. An archer, like an actual archer, like a bow and arrow archer, is like shooting an arrow at her. And Archer steps in between them and the arrow hits him in the shoulder. He like stops the arrow from hitting her. And he is in one of the robes that all the guys are wearing. Celaena goes to attack him too. He's like, you're wearing the uniform of the guys that are bad guys. But he's like, please give me just a minute to explain. And Celaena's like, unchain him. And he's like, let me explain. She's like, unchain him or I'm going to kill you. And so he's like, okay, we'll get Chaol unchained. Please don't murder me. And so they unchain Chaol, and Celaena says to him, you have 1 sentence to convince me not to kill you. And he says, Nehemia and I have been leading this movement together. She came here to organize a group of us to go to Terrasen and gather forces and uncover the king's real plan. Celaena does not point out that that is 3 sentences, not 1 sentence, but I will. And Celaena's like, that's impossible. And Archer's like, that's where she goes at night. She's been feeding all of us the information that she gets from you. Celaena asks, like, okay, well, where is Nehemia now? And Archer's like, ask Chaol. And Chaol's like, I don't know. And Archer's like, actually, no, that's not the truth, Chaol. You knew that the king planned on questioning her tonight. And he's like, that's actually the reason we brought him here. Like, we heard through the grapevine that he was made aware of a threat made to Nehemia's life, and he knew that the questioned her, and we wanted to know what kind of questions he'd been commanded to ask her. And we wanted to bring him here so you could hear it straight from his mouth, so you could, like, see the kind of man he is. And, like, Kayla's like, that's literally not true. Like, you haven't asked me anything. I've just been, like, sitting in the corner here while we waited for Celaena to show up. Kayla's like, I knew about the threat and I knew about the questioning, but like the questioning was never going to be by me. And Archer's like, yeah, we kind of realized that once we got you here. Like, moments before we got here, we realized the captain wasn't the only one to question her, but like they're not questioning her. They're going to be killing her. Isn't that right, Chaol? Celaena doesn't like not stick around for an answer. She immediately like books it out of there. She is like racing back to the castle. She is running. Chaol gets on a horse and like following after her, but she's running so fast. And she gets back to the castle. She rushes to Nehemia's room and she finds Nehemia in her room. I'm not going to put a picture up of this. Sorry, incredibly brutal scene. Her guards are laying around her, absolutely gutted. There's blood everywhere. And she hears footsteps coming up behind her. Like Nehemia is dead and someone is coming up behind her. Okay, we're actually going to stop there. I've already been filming for over an hour, and that was just part 1. We still have 90 slides to go. Oh my gosh, sorry. I made this one too long. I got too into it. But part 2 will be up on Monday. So don't fret. It will be coming soon. I have my MacBook is a lovely little lady. She's right in front of us right now. She's a lovely lady. I love her very much. But I got her in the year 2003. No, she's not that old. I got her in the year 2013. And so she's almost 11 years old. Her birthday is in March. So if everyone would wish her a happy birthday in March. But she cannot handle, like, she barely handled the Throne of Glass video. I don't think we can put her through anything longer than that video. And this one will probably be longer. So it's going to be in 2 parts. Part 1 is obviously up now, and then part 2 is going to go up on Monday. So you won't have like a big gap between the 2 of them, but that'll just give me a chance to like edit this part, get it up, and then get it off my computer, and then edit the next part, get it up. Okay, great. I will see you again for part 2 of Crown of Midnight. Yay!